Getting started, trying to be sensitive with everybody's time today. We appreciate everybody coming, having a bite to eat and sharing a meal, and talking about our project here. My name is Jay Camelli. I'm a landscape architect, principal with the Civil Environmental Consultants. I'll introduce, since he doesn't have them out.
Yeah.
Not full for him.
I'm Zach Crone, also a landscape architect with C.E.C, working with Jay and these guys.
Down at the end of the table, I think you might know that man.
I'm Patrick McMahon, civil engineer at C.E.C.
And last but not least,
Best hair ahead. Best hair ahead in the room.
we're not going to let him talk.
Yeah, you don't let me do much. I mostly just hang out. I'm Aaron Henry. I'm a structural engineer, and I manage the operations for C.E.C.
Mr. Mayor, you want to introduce?
Yeah, thank you very much. So we're pleased to follow up with this kickoff meeting related to the Special People's Park. So we recognize that there was quite a robust process to select a consultant, and so I want to extend my sincere thanks to Vice Mayor Satterfield and to the committee that reviewed a number of very good applications, but this one came out on top, and so we're really pleased to be working with the C.E.C. and getting this project launched. I will just reflect a little bit about the Special People's Park. This is a fairly recent acquisition by the city. As you know, it was donated by the Civitans, and we are grateful for that because it has been for a long time a very treasured resource in our city. So it provides access to the river, and something that we think is quite unique, not only for our area, but for the surrounding area. So both for our residents, folks in our local community, as well as our visitors, the Special People's Park is very important. Recently, we had to close the ramp that goes down into the river, as you all know, and I've probably received more calls about that than just about anything else since I've been in the position as the mayor. And so that just reinforces to me the fact that we need to work thoughtfully and put in place a good design that will be something that will be a resource going into the future. It's also an opportunity to improve what we have. What's there is very, very nice, very important, but we should take this opportunity to also look at ways to see if we can enhance that. It will require resources necessarily, so you all know we are constrained on our resources. But part of being able to solicit and gather additional resources for this project is having a good plan in place, something that will help us to scope it and understand what those resource requirements are going to be, and that way we can be able to go out and look for opportunities to be able to get resources through grants or allocations from the state or something else that might be appropriate for us to help accomplish this project. But one of the first things we recognize, Vice Mayor Satterfield, I give her credit for vision here, that we have to have a plan to be able to help us do that, and I think that's what we're going to start on today. So with that, really appreciate y'all coming and getting this kicked off, and I'll ask Vice Mayor if she'd like to make any other remarks.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for lunch. Also, this park is so special to a lot of people. Even what Mr. Riddle was saying earlier, people are still using the park. So Mother's Day weekend, there was people out there using the picnic tables and the grills, so it's very missed by many, and I see a lot of people, sometimes I just go down and sit and watch and see what kind of traffic it gets. And so what I've noticed is like the Edford buses will pull in there, and even last year before we had to close the ramp down, we had a local husband and wife fly fishing group bring a C.E.C. 1 class to that park to show them down by the river how to catch trout, fly fishing, and kind of showing them the ecosystem in the river. So people are still coming and wanting to enjoy the park. It's not just abandoned. but the river, the access to the river is very missed. I've also received a lot of calls and emails about that park. It's very small space to work with, but that river is probably the only public access point in town, because a lot of properties on the river are privately owned. That's pretty much the only one I can think of, unless you're going to go rent a tube for the day. So it's a vital source of access to the river. So it's very important to us. It's very special. We were fortunate to get it from the C.E.C. Club. And in 2019, I know that they spent around $18,000 on the park, I believe is what we were told. Just, I think on the tables that are there and the grills. So, but I can't wait to see it back open. I know it's going to be a while, but I'm very excited to move forward with this finally. So thank you all very much.
Could I have just one observation about the park?
Sure.
I don't think anybody besides people that may know, they see any difference between the picnic tables that are along that other strip and the picnic tables. They see it as one park,
Yeah.
as one area.
Thank you. We've got, one commissioner and. Yeah, if you don't mind.
So, I'm Dan Dykens, I'm city commissioner.
Oh, sorry, we're on.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike Bryant, retired architect, volunteer, just helping out.
Jeff Riddle, same retired architect volunteer.
I'm Don Prater, Mayor, City of Townsend.
Kelsey Satterfield, Vice Mayor, Parks and Rec Commissioner.
Tammy Glady, I'm one of the members on the Parks and Rec Committee.
Great. Great. Well, thank you all again for coming and giving us this opportunity to sit with you and understand some of your needs and wants and kind of help us pull together a scope to see where we can take this project forward. Kind of following the agenda that Aaron was kind enough to put out for everyone. We always want to start with what do we want. Even if it's pie in the sky, it's always great to hear these things and see how we can incorporate as many of them as possible. Some may be challenging financially, some may be challenged because of how the river access sits on the property, side of the property. But it's always good to have, we want to hear everything. I mean, even if it sounds crazy or outlandish, we want to hear it because we feel it's important to understand, how the park could maybe evolve over, the next few years. It could happen in phases. It could, be dependent on funding, but if we do this right, we do the plan correctly. And I look at plans as a living document. You're paying for a plan to go forward. The plan can pivot. The plan can always be adjusted to meet the needs of the community, the environment. If there's something that comes up at some time, there may be some needs that we don't identify right now that can be brought in later. Maybe you can pivot the plan. So I guess I'd open the floor up. I know there's been a lot of discussion, probably before we got involved, of what does this park mean to us and how do we need to go forward with it. The Civitan was kind enough to make the deal with you all to have the park, but how do we take it to the next level? And what have you heard from your community and what the Parks Board and things like that, all the work that you put in today? And if we could have and share some of that information, I think that'll really help us kind of draw a scope together.
Well, in your,
Yep.
for the RFQ, the concept, I really liked. I liked everything about it, even up to the trees.
Yes.
It really is good.
Not We let him loose, and
Thank you.
he had fun with it.
I thought it just made sense. And to me, it looks simple, but it's probably not that simple. I like how you incorporated some stairs on one side and kind of like a launch for people, because even though, I mean, we've seen people carry their kayaks down there and float in the water. But also the landing platform, which has completely cracked at this point. And our maintenance team has went down there since you told me about it and put more yellow tape around it, more signage. So we knew it was eventually going to crack. I don't know what did it. Could have been the earthquake. It needs to be the sustainability, something sustainable material, rebuilt back, that's long lasting. And so I really like this concept. I don't know how many of you saw this concept that they did put together, but I really liked it.
So when we developed that concept, we purposefully didn't do a lot of homework on you all. It was our impression.
Okay.
And we didn't want to project a preconceived notion for the community.
Okay.
We wanted to leave it as open and as flexible as possible. A lot of times consultants will come in and done all this homework on the front end, and they'll want to run with that concept because they feel it's what you need. I like to say we flip on that because we want to understand how your community uses the space, how you feel, not only folks that are handicapped, but the rest of the community can enjoy the space. And with it being really the only public boat launch in town, you need to include everybody.
Right.
It just doesn't need to be a single user.
Right. That's what Team Deck even said as
Yeah.
well.
So I feel like it's a good jumping off point.
Sure.
But I want to be sensitive to what the community has given you, the Parks Board has given you, many of your ideas, because you guys are here every day, obviously. Go down there and kind of observe what's going on. And take all that and kind of meld it into what we think would be a good concept to pursue funding with, to develop a plan of phasing and things like that. So again, I would love to hear from you all just to build this list.
Dave, if I could just come in on this point, and I see you've got it as one of the items on the other side, but as I'm reflecting on what the Civitans expressed to us when they donated that park to the city, and what I've heard from our residents is that there still needs to be, to the extent that now it's a government and not a private property, an ability to prioritize access for people with limited mobility or other things like that. So we probably have a little bit more homework to do on our end to make sure that we're following all the regulations and things along that. But I appreciate that this, can be a resource for other parts of the community. And that, there's a lot of utility in making it, we have to think about it, for multiple uses.
Yeah.
But the intent, when it was given to us by the Civitans, is that, it is a place that people can access that ordinarily can't do that.
Correct.
And so it may, in its final iteration, look so good that everybody wants to access it, and that everybody can access it. And that might be, when I say we have to check our government regulations on that. But still, it needs to be set up so that it maintains that intention.
Right.
And so we'll have to figure out, what the right way is to make sure that, it doesn't become overwhelmed by people that are, trying to use it. And it doesn't sort of meet that original intention. So we've got to balance that. It's different having a space that's in government hands versus private hands.
For sure.
we have things that we'll need to take into considerations, but as we're building it out, it should definitely, facilitate that. I like the original concept, Vice Mayor, I think that's good. One thing that I did see on there that, in its current form, it has the platform that's down there. And people love that, to get down on that platform, because you can get close to the river. But it's still, you can't get in the river. And so I frequently have seen people down there with mobility restrictions get right to the very edge so that they can get as close to the water. And I understand that desire. So, as I'm looking at the concept still, I don't know if there's a way. And of course, you'd have to work with TDEC, and we're already going to have to work with TDEC because we're right there, on the boundary with the river.
Sure.
But if there's some way, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about, maybe enhancing it even beyond where it is. If there's a way to safely, we have to consider safety too. Because
Always.
the other thing is water can come up pretty quickly.
Right.
And if you have mobility restrictions and water starts coming up, you have to be able to. Now, there are provisions in the state law that, also can help us in terms of, that type of situation. But, if it can be a world class, as far as it can go, to be able to meet its original intent, I think that will help make it, something that's beyond even its unique and treasured status now.
Mayor, I know what you're getting at. That park was developed probably as an initial response to the ADA laws back in 1992, or whenever it was. But anything now that these guys will do has to meet the ADA.
Right.
So to say any public park, any public park that they design is open to anybody.
Right.
Right.
Including individuals with handicaps and access issues. So, as unique as that parcel, and because that parcel is so unique, to say that it's just for handicapped people, that's a tough one.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
not,
and
and I'm very careful, to say that, because, and that's the difference now.
Yeah.
You can't restrict access,
Right.
but you can make sure that it's set up to meet an original intent.
Which is,
And
they have to do anyway.
Right, which they have to do anyway, but,
Just for your knowledge, we're all really well versed in KDA design. I've done probably hundreds of ramps in public housing authorities and the private sector across the state of Tennessee and actually around the country. Everyone is unique. There are probably no two that are, they might be close, but they're not really the same. But they're all, it's a different challenge that's presented, because you have different grades that you're dealing with, you have different requirements of the site. You have a combination of users that might be able to use the site. And that's, to his point, it will be designed for public access.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't make that differentiation.
yeah, we'll have to sort that out.
Yeah.
One other type, so we talked about mobility, ADA. I'm aware that over in Sevier County, they've had a couple of parks that they've built recently that go beyond just mobility limitations. And so these are for people that have other types of emotional or other things. And there might be some things there that we could consider and build.
For sensory.
For sensory and other
Parks with
types of things, yeah.
deprivation and things like that. You can do things with sound, with color, with texture. And those are all really, they've come a long way in the last several years, so there's a lot more options. And I would like to say they're probably a little bit more affordable than they used to be. when they first kind of started being the hot item that included parks and recreation, because nobody really knew about it. The law adjusts to accommodate different folks, and unfortunately, folks take advantage of that. Make a lot more money, but there's opportunities to include those kinds of things for, to cover all aspects of accessibility. You say accessibility, but through the ADA.
Yeah, that's good. Patrick, let's capture something on that point that's beyond mobility limitations.
Yep.
Just let me ask a question. You truly mean ADA compliant, not accessibility?
Yes.
We have people that say accessibility, but they don't know the ADA
Yeah, we're
requirements.
ADA.
We need ADA.
We will have to be ADA
Okay,
compliant.
just want to make sure.
Yes, sir. To keep the community safe and to keep them out of potential litigation, yes.
Yeah.
That's how we view it.
We had read, I think it was a newspaper article a while ago, that there may be an ordinance that does
Prohibit use.
Yeah, prohibit use of the park, I know it's not. Is that
When we
old?
were vacationing here, there was written words that I read. It's not there now,
Yeah.
but it used to have some written words to that effect.
I think when it was owned by the Civitan group, that was,
Yeah, it was more than 5 years ago.
Okay.
yeah, they were the ones, I think, because it was a privately
It was
owned.
privately
They were
owned.
like, this is strictly just for.
And the newspaper said something about there's a city ordinance.
Really?
It spelled that out. So
Yeah.
that may be something we need to.
Maybe I don't have found one.
Oh, look, I don't remember.
It may have been a
Yeah.
private rule we can't apply that to the
I
city.
think the wording said something about an ordinance.
Yeah.
It just, as an architect, it was like, well, I've never seen
Never seen
that.
that. But, I
It's
mean,
quite unusual.
so that there's, just from a high level, something as simple as the number of accessible parking spaces. Right? We're not going to meet the minimum there. Right? We're going to go beyond to try to make sure that it's pretty obvious that this park primarily serves those with accessibility or developmental needs that aren't met elsewhere. So I think we can do things in the design that would put a primacy on that access for people.
And just get it out there, I know there's a accessible porta potty down there, but I don't know the Tennessee law, if you have to have, when do you have to have a bathroom in the park? But I know if you do have to have a bathroom, it has to be accessible.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's kind of a unique situation. We'll have to look a little more into that one, since you're already providing a facility.
But I would think,
Yeah.
since you're doing wish lists,
Right.
that
Yeah.
we would want a permanent, whatever that means, a permanent one would be on the ultimate wish list.
Sure.
Jay, I think during this process, you should bring to the table what are possibilities for that park. We all may not know.
Yes.
I mean, I've got a list here, but with your experience, and really to open up the possibilities of that park beyond what it is right now. Doesn't mean they can afford it,
Right.
but, and I think the development of a master plan with priorities is probably where it's going to end up and the way it should go. But again, I'm really encouraged that, I mean, that piece of property is so unique. It's a gateway into the city. It's got such a tremendous potential with that adjacent property, which I hope somebody will look into as a potential. To bring in ideas that go beyond what it is right now. And of course, from what you hear from the public, I assume it'll be public input sessions, that will probably prioritize for the city what to do.
Sure.
So how many parking spaces, a fixed restroom, observation decks, landscaping, I mean, there is just a multitude of, I mean, you look at what Chattanooga did with their riverfront park. I mean, that was remarkable. I don't think it's gonna happen, I obviously it's not gonna happen here. Right. But what it says is that it kind of illustrates for you all the potential that's out there. And like I say, I'm not spending the city's money, they're not gonna be able to afford it, but they've got a plan, they've got, as the mayor said, they've got something to go after some. So anyway, I kind of made my call.
I appreciate
I
that.
have a list here.
Yeah, but before we leave that point, let me just build on that a little bit. So as part of the update of our community plan, also known as our land use and transportation plan, we are working with consultants to help us develop that plan. And part of that contract is to develop a Parks and Rec master plan. And so this activity for the Special People's Park will fit within the Parks and Rec plan. So probably what we're doing here today will be a lot more granular than whatever goes into that Parks and Rec master plan. But the adjacent property, Mike, is a good point. So we need to consider that, because directly adjacent to this, and what makes it really neat, is we have all that area up through there. Now, some of that sits in the highway right-of-way.
Right.
And we do have a current agreement with TDOT regarding highway right-of-way, and we're at the point where we're updating that arrangement as well. And so that's the arrangement that covers those picnic tables, I think, and some of that area on that other side. If it's in the right-of-way, that agreement will cover that. But we're right to be thinking about that, and I think that's what will help us too, because then you'll have sort of this whole thing that, people will sort of know, where to go and how to sort themselves out, a little bit, and that'll be helpful.
I'd say a lot of people, like you said earlier, they think it's one park, probably.
Probably.
Because it just kind of flows
It's continuous.
together. I know that there is also a private property owner that owns a little bit of green back from here, I believe. So that's privately owned, I think, by the owners of Apple Valley across the road.
Yep.
So, and then this is all TDOT in this area. But
When Kelsey and I met the guy from the extension office from UT, he was helping at the time, I think, with the RFP, wasn't it?
he was, yes,
Yeah.
Brad, he was helping with MTAX for develop the RFQ.
And he made an interesting comment. He said that, and he asked about the park, the adjacent area down there. And, we just asked him to talk about it in general terms. And he said, well, ask the DOT if they'll give it to you. They don't use it.
It's right there.
You maintain it.
Well, we have good.
He said it's done before. It's been done before.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, the Civitans just donated this area, so we do have good lines of communication, and it makes sense to, have some engagement there on that area as well.
Hey Jay, I put together a list of preliminary scope here, and it's kind of micro in some degrees.
Okay.
I'll just pass it along to you. Kelsey's seen it, everybody's seen it on that
Yes,
committee.
this list that he's given you, I've sent to all of you already, and it's something Mike put together, which is some.
Thank you.
So it can be just talking points, it
Sure.
can be check boxes, it can be expanded on, it can be added to.
Thank you.
Just a way to start.
Can I ask a question about the property? For instance, I live on the river, and my deed goes all the way out to the middle of the river. I don't own the water, I own the river bottom.
But you have your area, right?
Yes, and anybody stands up in the river is trespassing.
Correct.
But does this property go all the way out to the middle of the river, or does it stop at the shoreline?
Yeah, there's some deeds that are written that go to the middle, and they even show up in Tennessee parcel view as going to the middle. The boundaries you see on these plots here are kind of zoomed out. You got some smaller ones going around. They show the 3 properties right on the river. And I'm sure the bank of the river was where that property line is, and it's moved over time. But no, to answer your question, they don't go out the middle of the river.
So that could affect what you put in the river,
Sure.
not just TDAC.
Right.
Which we're kind of, it's a very natural progression. We're moving into constraints. You know, what are the constraints we're gonna bump into, and there's opportunities in there too, so.
Let's, real quick, just trying to look at if there's anything we've missed in the one before that. As far as the historical use, I know anecdotally, we know the phone calls and such. Do we have any, how often is it used, by how many people? Just kind of rough ballpark idea, or we just pretty sure it's used a lot?
603 people you can call.
I mean, it's hard to say,
That's a lot.
I also like to
Yeah.
drive by there, it's like on the weekends, especially in the summer, there's somebody always there,
Yeah.
typically. And, you know, kind of also digressing like back to what we've heard in the Parks and Rec Committee, I think we've covered most of the areas that people have brought up, like a viewing platform, I want to be able to fish down there, I want to be able to put a kayak down there. I want to be able to, in my wheelchair, roll down and touch my feet in the water, like, you know what I mean, all those things, you know, I think we've kind of already talked about, you know, of what we're hearing from the community as far as overwhelming. But I don't know if we have like numbers. I mean, people are always there. I've met homeschool, people that come down
Sure.
there to homeschool and do like a science thing down there. I've met like all sorts of different, you know, people that, you know, are not having accessibility, and because they think it's a whole park, so they just kind of set up there with tents and, you know, whatever. So I've seen a lot of, I've seen a lot of
We
different
had a
stuff.
teacher submit a grant on the Education Foundation.
Yep.
One county,
So-
a teacher submitted a grant for kids to go down to the river.
Yep.
And study.
Yeah, so I think, you know, between, and even our own school, right? Like they could, if, you know, possibly, you know, carefully, possibly. But I have not, I've met homeschoolers, I've met all sorts of people.
And not really, like a number, although I'm going to write that number down, Pat.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's good to know, just kind of, you know, is it ever, you guys ever drive by and it is packed? It's
I
at
mean, a couple weeks ago, it was pretty packed when I drove by it.
Okay, good.
And that was,
Mother
that
Day.
was
holiday.
Yeah, it was a holiday.
Every picnic table was full.
Yeah,
And people, some people drove up to the other picnic, some people just picnic there.
Yeah,
and they're using the grills. I
Yeah.
mean, they're still using
Great.
it. We, you know, I didn't have the bathroom before. We put the bathroom in for them to be in. Because that was one of the things that we would go out and survey people while they were there last year.
Oh, that's good.
After we had closed the ramp down, we're like, hey, like, we're gonna start trying to put together a plan for this park at some point. And one of the things that they said was, well, it'd be nice to have a bathroom here. So even though it's a portaloo, they're very grateful to have it
Yeah,
there.
sure.
Because imagine being in a wheelchair and having to go to the bathroom and having to leave the premises. You know,
To go
that's,
somewhere.
yeah, and
That's-
so we didn't want them to have to do that anymore, and so that was an added bonus.
Yeah.
We do have a sign there, I don't know if you noticed, but we did put signage there to honor the Civic Tan Club for their many years of
Yeah.
service, because I believe what they told us was that it was the first roadside
Yeah.
picnic area on the river
Yeah.
in Tennessee, and there's a year on there, maybe 1980 something.
Yeah, I wanted to add, there are a lot of historical elements. Mayor, you're right, it's such a unique thing that you guys were given this park.
Yeah.
Wanted, you know, what about preserving that history? Do we want to historical
Well, I was
markers?
gonna say, yeah, I think we'd like to maintain that signage somewhere, and whatever our plan
I
is
mean,
to.
I personally like to rename the park. I hate the name of the park. In my personal opinion, I would rather name it in honor of the woman that they, like, I'd rather call it that, or something like Rob Paluski, or something that we, or both, or something that,
Yeah.
because it's not just a special people's park anymore. It's gonna be, so, but I wanna honor
Yeah.
what
What was
it's about.
honor the historical significance.
Mhm, yeah.
I've had feedback on both sides,
Mhm.
that people say, well, we're all special, we're all special. And so I'm like, and so they like the name, but then I get a lot of people saying, well, I wish the name was different. So that is something to explore.
Well, and it's another way to sort of emphasize the intended use. So I'm not against looking into developing a new name for it, but in the name of that area could be a way to also sort of reinforce the legacy and the intended use.
Yeah.
And I think you're good, right on that
Yeah.
point. I wanted to mention one more thing there, electricity. So we talked about there's people come with different types of medical equipment. And that medical equipment sometimes limits the amount of time they can spend there. Because if you've got medical equipment requires power and you're on a battery source, that's some limitations. So
Yeah.
we might think about that.
An ADA compliant restroom would require power.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then that can be.
Could be solar.
Could be solar, but, so when we did, and then that's the cool part about brainstorming all the ideas, is likely, all this doesn't happen at once, right? There's a phasing to it, because with the restroom, now you're talking about building, and the power, you probably need a storage closet of some capacity, you have to maintain it, clean, all the things. That doesn't have to be something that gets, when we put our kind of list of ideas, we can then kind of, where's the priority right now? But if it's in part of the plan, you go ahead, this at some point is going to be something we want to do.
I have one more wish list, like something covered. So like if it's super hot out or maybe raining a little bit, to have like maybe some picnic tables that are covered a little bit, and maybe they have to reserve those tables, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something that, you know what I mean, something that would be covered so they're not just baking in the sun.
I know that when I was Parks Director for city, and I was there for several years. We got to the point where we had made so many nice improvements that we actually had to put in a little bit of a rental system. Because
Yeah.
people
It costs
were,
money to maintain.
well, it cost money to maintain, but we were having folks.
Riffraff.
Yeah, well, we had folks that would try and camp out and hold
Right.
tables and this
Right.
and that and the other thing, and we're just trying to make it fair for everybody.
Mhm.
That way everybody could use the space.
Right.
Nobody was monopolizing it.
Right.
Couple more things. As we're thinking about this reminded me about shade. It's got some nice shady spots, where the sun is. But if we start to expand, depending on what we do with this infrastructure, it could affect the amount of shade, or maybe we want to improve the amount of shade. There's a variety of ways to do that, including sales and parks and things like that. Sure. Might ought to consider. And drainage, important consideration too, because I know Commissioner Jenkins is very well schooled in drainage. You probably got it on his
On my
list.
list here.
Now you're talking about later.
As it flies out of his pen, Yeah.
Stormwater management is going to be key, because we are on the river. We'll have to look at and assess, talking a little out of my lane, but assess
Go right
the floodplain down there to see what kind of
I mean, it gets pretty
impacts,
high
if
pretty
any.
quickly, at times, depending on how fast the river rains.
What about playground equipment?
Well, and this is my opinion, I don't see playground there. I see more, now if I did see something there, and this is just my vision, maybe, this has been mentioned by a couple of residents here in town, maybe some outdoor
Like
fitness
workout,
equipment.
like this one you're gonna do
Outdoor
chin-ups.
Like on the green one.
Yeah. Like one of those, like a rower or like the elliptical, like the, you know what I'm talking about, the
Well,
outdoor
they
fitness
could, on the
equipment.
kids line,
Um,
there's a lot of accessible
Yeah.
playground equipment.
And we,
As you guys know, and I did that at the University of Illinois. But I realized you start doing playground, even a minor amount takes up a lot of space, and it draws, believe me, it will draw a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's playground equipment that's uniquely suited
That's
for.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm kind of thinking back to the sensory and the educational, and when
Right.
Tammy brought up homeschool, there are a lot of people that homeschool their kids in this town. I did not realize that. And just like the C.E.C. one classroom, Heritage High School, I want that to be able to continue. I think the mayor, you had even mentioned this before, but maybe some educational,
Educational
some, yeah, just some literature, some signage, maybe that's, I don't know, interactive, but informing them about the river.
The salamanders,
The salamanders, and the trout. Yes.
So you could see this park without playground equipment, and that would more emphasize it, what sort of the mayor's getting getting at the original intent of this,
Mhm.
was to get accessibility down to the river.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't have to, by doing this other stuff, the other senses,
Mhm.
Well, as a small site, what's going to drive other uses is how much is left over when
Right.
you put the parking in.
Right.
So how much parking, what's the expectation for, 'cause I don't think there's a rule. I'm trying to think if there's a rule on the number of parking spaces
Well,
per
we got you a question.
riverfront or whatever, but there may be just a number of parking number of parking spaces that the city wants as minimum.
So this
You
situation.
kind of get that done,
really-
and then you're kind of left with whatever's, space you have left over for benches and.
Well, I think that's right, Mike, because then we do have the adjacent space that would have other things in it that would draw people over to the other
Or
space.
you could put more handicap parking there.
Yeah.
So,
So on this side, not on this side, but on T-Dot's side, we've got about 5 parking places right there. There, in the time I've lived here, I think I've only seen maybe 2 vehicles actually parked on the park property. Or there might be one of the Ether buses that come in and park.
is the propensity to park on the neighboring site and then
Well,
disembark across?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
That happens a lot.
it's gonna
I
happen.
mean,
Yeah,
was
it's
it,
gonna happen.
who was it that said we don't need this many handicap parking spots?
so,
Right?
We
They
can go
said-
beyond the minimum.
Right.
yeah, you can always go beyond.
But I'm saying what we have there currently, they said you don't need this many. Who was it that told you that?
I don't think.
It was one of the first people that came out to look at the park, whatever. They're like.
It must have been our first T-Day
I
parks
think it was, okay.
consultant.
They were just surprised. They were like, you don't need all these handicap spaces.
Yeah.
Certainly we need handicap spaces. I'm
I
not
think
saying
that was
that,
Thomas Lamb.
but, okay, but they were saying you don't need all of them to be handicap spaces, like, like whatever. So I remember they were talking about that.
It's a delicate balance, because if you look at your site, it's probably over 60% paved. That's really not parking. It's parking.
Right.
But knowing how this started, what the intent was, I get it, they were looking for hard surfaces. This was probably back in the 90s when hard surface was it. We know that that's accessible. We know it's not going to be a difficult thing. So I get why they did it, but there's different ways to address it now.
Yeah.
Parking obviously is going to be needed. There's going to have to be some consensus among this group in conjunction with reviewing the regulations to see what we feel is a reasonable amount of parking, because this is very unique. There's no facility that they're coming to that drives the number of spaces that you've got, as in a building. And there's not a big playground where you're going to let 50 to 100 kids run around on. So that helps you factor in number of cars that you could be parking.
Jay, that's a good point. I think that, I would hope that either through the dual use of the adjacent property and the park's property, that you could find some efficiencies in your parking.
Sure.
That gives you then more green space in the special people's park. More grass or
Yeah.
paved area, more areas for picnic tables,
Yeah.
besides just being a parking lot, because
Right.
that's essentially what it is.
Well, especially on the west side, because there's that median, there's a hard curving right there, which is a nice little area, but
Creating issues there too.
on the park side of it, people are just driving in parking and, really a driveway to parking lot in the park. And so if we can find an efficient use of space to say, no, let's not have the parking spaces over there. You just granted yourself a lot more to park.
Right.
I don't know
I
if
think
it's
that's the kind of thinking that, at least throw it out there.
Yeah.
Throw the idea out that maybe all the parking's on the other space, and you open up this entire park for green space.
Right.
Lots more picnic tables, lots more accessibility.
Sure.
Well,
Picnic tables, amenities, as an option.
yeah, the parking is one way to address the intended use.
Mhm.
And so if we have an adjacent park that has plenty of parking and we can have more picnic tables and whatever else we want up there, it's a way to, and it's something that's within our ability to enforce.
Yeah.
I think you look at it both ways. You know, when you focus on, obviously, our site, but then focus on the big picture. Is there a way to come up with a, you know, an all-encompassing way to use that right-of-way that's on that side? You know, we've got some paved surfaces, there's other picnic tables outside of the park. You know, the traffic movements kind of flow and work really well with that park. It is a little difficult getting in and out of this park if you're, you know, if you're not on the right side of the road, you gotta do a U-turn.
Right.
Which, you know, all that great, especially if you're in like a minibus or something like that with wheelchairs, it's not ideal. So it's another consideration to just explore how and what the best routing for things could be, not only from pedestrian access, but how you deal with the vehicles that are coming in and out of the park, and how we can provide a little separation between those. Because, you know, if you've got kids either with mobility challenge or adults or whoever with mobility challenge, and you've got cars, it's never a good thing. You always want to try and have some separation.
Some barrier there that already exists, but to lean into it, you know, if we can get the parking counts to work, which we have some flexibility there, because there's a pretty limited amount of hard line. If you remove the vehicles there, that
It helps.
provides a lot more opportunity for park itself.
There's also a safety issue.
Well, I
You
was
can
just gonna bring
move
that up.
cars over here.
Yeah.
When they pull out, there's a crossing
Right,
across
right.
all four lanes.
And that-
Right.
Whereas if you're pulling out over here, you don't have that.
Right, and I doubt we would get a second median cut there across to the other side because they're so close.
I think everything's on the table.
I don't-
In terms
well,
of, you know, what we might need to do to.
Yes. The other thing that we need to keep in mind, it is along a major highway, which is always a concern with youngsters.
You don't want to start wrong.
We want to be sensitive about, you know, either how or if separation is needed, depending on how the plan evolves. Are we going to create some kind of separation from if we have kids running around, or just things to think about? Again, I go back to several of the parks that we've done where we've actually put in either plantings or a physical fence of some sort that was visually appealing, but it just broke things up and slowed little ones down so that mom and dad could get to them quick. You know, because kids will be kids.
The bike trails are out there too.
Right.
So you're gonna have people come into the park, maybe on a bicycle.
Sure.
Yeah.
And right now, well, when I bike through right by the picnic tables, the T-Dot picnic tables.
Yep.
And sometimes I'll jump on, there's a pretty wide place by the road, but I know in any race, you jump on that road by the picnic tables and then you go back to the bike path.
Yeah. There were
So,
several bikers out there earlier when we were there. And they were.
so a big first step for everybody, for you guys, is what is the project area scope? That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're
Everything we're
talking
talking
about.
about, and I'm not gonna, don't wanna stop that.
Yeah.
But eventually, that's.
Yeah.
The transition to a really important point, what are the community partners that are important? I mean, we've got us in the room here.
Right.
But, TDOT and Oldham Properties, those have to be partners even at the grant stage, because we could come up with the best plan and beautiful ideas, but if we don't have buy-in and support from those folks,
Yeah.
we're stuck with kind of a postage stamp.
Well, that's where the Parks and Rec master plan can potentially come in. And so it may be that together with Parks and Rec Committee, your all's expertise, you might generally make some recommendations about what happens on that adjacent area. Doesn't mean that you're charged to design that area as well.
Sure.
But you could provide some input and things that might need to be considered, and we could put it in the Parks and Rec master plan. And the opportunity to get that thinking, while we're thinking about this area of the Special People's Park, we could also understand what it means there at the interface with the other park, because eventually we'll have a well-developed plan for that too.
So Mayor, if I'm understanding you correctly, are you talking about which additional park are you talking about?
I'm talking about this.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the distinction, because
Yeah.
I don't know if I speak for everybody, but I was thinking Special People's Park was gonna kind of include the whole, both these lots, if we could pull them off. But these would be, okay,
This is T-Dot.
Right,
Over
right.
here. But we have a lease agreement with T-Dot,
Right.
which we're actually in the middle of working on
Revising.
renewing. So,
and so Kelsey, what Parks and Rec is looking at developing would be,
Now, see that?
This
This-
area, but having
Options.
parking
Okay.
over here.
So this line is at least approximately where TDOT right of way is.
Yeah.
So really, all of that area up there is all
Okay.
between
Yeah.
TDOT. This parcel here is owned by the whole
Yes.
city.
Yeah.
And then this is the city's.
Yep.
So it's really the three partnership with all three entities in this case. So with TDOT, we can float the idea of would they give the property back? They might, they might not. Is it a lease agreement? Is it a permanent easement? There are opportunities to kind of, there needs to be some permanent.
TDOT or Oldham?
Well, both. I mean, in some cases, both. I mean, I think
But TDOT, it's a lease agreement.
it's a lease agreement.
Yeah. So they're not gonna, deed it back over to the
Right.
city or anything like that.
Okay.
So I think we've already had that discussion, and that's not.
Is there a way for the people in the room, especially on the city side, or take this and draw, how big would you love it to be?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
by all means, we can make any of these you want. I mean, draw in.
I mean, is it from this entrance right here? Yeah.
He knows what it's going to be, whatever that he is.
Ideally, yes.
Well, I think what's in the scope of the master plan, the Parks and Rec master plan, Jeff, is this area that you're drawing out there. The whole thing is in the scope of the Parks and Rec master plan.
okay.
What we're talking about on this proposal is the portion of that is the Special People's Park.
So is that even possible?
That's in the scope of the Parks and Rec master plan. That's not in the scope of what we're.
The specific area.
Nesting
we're talking
within
about.
there.
So,
But what I would say is.
Use a different
We need to,
Yeah.
we need to have some consideration for that piece. because I think-
Yeah.
is that X
Well,
what you're looking at?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You're not quite right.
Pretty
but
close.
yeah, they're pretty close,
Can
yeah.
I ask you another question? So if we're asking for money, we're putting together grant applications already. Is there any, what is the folly in putting together grant applications to cover the whole thing?
I think it should be possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think
No,
that's-
the whole thing being over here.
Right.
Well, and
right.
that's why it's important that this is linked tightly with the Parks and Rec master plan. So we could put in a grant for the whole thing. That would include, this portion, but also, maybe include a broader portion because of.
Here's phase one, here's phase
Phase
two.
two.
And one might strengthen the other when it came to, the.
But as we
possibility of that
advance,
grant getting approved. That's
yeah, as we advance through this, I think we can think about, with respect to granularity, the special people's part. Take a little deeper dive there.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Because it'll definitely,
It's got to go.
I see a lot of phases.
yeah.
One of the things that the new party consultant from TA, Kirsten, she came to the park and met with me a few weeks ago. One of the things that TDEC has an initiative for, especially with their grant applications, is to reference Access 2030.
Okay.
She said that was a key point, an element that would definitely needed to happen with grant applications. She said it puts more points on the board when you reference Access 2030.
Have you all ever received a grant report of this?
no, because
You-
we don't have a master plan
You
for
are-
Parks and Rec yet.
We were at the top of the list.
Where-
What's your master plan?
Yeah, that's what
we
she said, and we should be wrapping up the community plan.
End
Early
of summer,
fall.
early fall, yeah.
And
Okay.
that's the overall,
That's the
that's the
overall
overall
land use.
Parks and Rec. is,
It's within it.
Within that.
It's within it.
Is there a, how far through that process for the Parks and Rec side are, is the planning?
I'd say we're still, probably, I'd say we're about halfway with the Parks and Rec master plan.
I mean, if there's a way to tie, I mean, we'll have to tie these two together, they're gonna have to marry.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And so if we can, as we get a scope developed to make sure that it aligns with what is in the intended master plan.
We should probably make a meeting just sort of on that
Yeah.
point right there to make sure
Very much.
that, how it fits together and,
I think it's important for the continuity of both parcels.
yeah.
You know, ideally, it works a lot better together than they do apart. They're actually kind of two awkward stepchildren, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm picking on anybody, but it's just, you know,
Well,
They
because
don't
they're
work.
flowing together
Yeah.
naturally already.
yes.
So it only makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we can capitalize on
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got a few things I want to report out. This piece of property falls within the FEMA flood zone.
that. Yes, sir.
If you put a building there, like a restroom,
It's
it would
challenging.
have to be elevated 4 feet above the ground.
I don't think it would be 4 feet. I don't know the BFE, base flood elevation off the top of my
Pretty
head.
high.
We will have, and the other option is it can be at ground level.
It could be a ground.
It can be flood proof, so that it's flood able. So like, all maintenance got to do is go in and hit it with a hose and it's ready to go.
The other thing is with a building like that, you can put what they call flood vents in it.
Yeah.
Or the flow flows through it. It's not ideal,
Yeah.
but it does give you
Okay.
options.
All right.
One of the things we've done, similar instance was if you have, let's say, masonry block, if it's 4 feet, we're gonna fill the bottom 4 feet of cells. That
Then you
way,
have to have a ramp for people to get up to it.
Oh,
I think a floodable structure is going to be the way to go.
yeah, and not
No.
to, just to fill in the walls where they're flood proofed and flood resistant, where they structurally, maintenance wise, it can
It
be.
could take the beating.
Okay, just, I wanted to point that out. There's a couple other things. There's a creek to the west side of this piece of property. We call it Blue Stream because it only has water in it occasionally. But it's still a stream that we have to stay back from a certain amount.
Do you know where it is?
Yeah, it's a
You looking at that?
It doesn't really show up on there.
Can you pencil it in?
Yeah, just
No,
general.
it's basically down at this end.
Okay,
Okay?
okay.
So you have to take that into consideration.
It's almost kind of by that restaurant.
It's almost right on the edge of the property. And according to our ordinances, you have to stay 15 feet away from it, but that's our ordinances. I don't know what the T-Bag.
So is that like drainage?
I guess you could call it that, but it's
That
actually.
it's not coming, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
coming
not-
from under the ground. under the
Well, it
street.
comes from the other side of the highway,
Yeah.
okay?
Is it mapped somewhere? we
It
have?
shows up on stream stats or.
Not sure.
but
I think it
It might
is.
show up on-
I think it's on our city book.
Yeah, we should find out, where it's mapped.
And
that
and what
way.
the requirements are, but we need to make sure.
So
Now,
that's a good point.
there's another issue, which you've probably already taken into account. But back in the 90s, when they built the 4-lane, they had to stop work on it for 2 years while they dug indent remains on this side of the road.
Yep.
I don't know if you're gonna have to have some architectural or not, archaeological
Yeah.
study done to do, to put a post hole in the ground.
We would want to involve State Historic Preservation Office on the front end, and there's a process to go through that. There's an initial field visit, and it's like, well, isn't it worth digging potholes? Let's go pothole it, and depending on what that turns up, that sort of, it all plays out from there. That absolutely is an important piece of the
We
puzzle.
may be able to get the report from the original investigation for the road, and that may help us, help guide us in this area.
I know TDOT has been very stringent to some people along the road when they wanted to buy some of the property from TDOT, but TDOT wanted them to do archaeological studies on that piece of property before they could buy it.
Sure.
So, I don't know, but you're right in the part of it. They didn't dig this up
Yeah.
because of what was on.
Anything that's in, as part of our agreement, anything that's in the right of way, we would have to submit through state archaeologists, and so Pat's raising a good point here. I don't know, I don't think this area was previously excavated, so if it was, then you'd already have that information.
I think all the excavation would go
I think you're right.
Yeah.
where they put the concrete slabs over the graves and all that
Right,
stuff.
Yeah, for the sake of scope of what's in the grant, I think, yeah,
Yeah.
historical preservation is part of that.
Yeah.
Part of the puzzle.
But I think they'll work with us, and I think
I
we'll
think
have to work.
so, but we just have to be cognizant of that
Yeah,
issue.
Jay and I ran
How's
that.
Hilton C. Yeah, we had to move an entire project because we found a village.
Yeah.
They had to move the road over because of the village.
Yeah. I think that's, I mean, I'm writing down, we're jumping around a little bit, that's great. I'm writing that, I mean, cultural resources, archaeology, we've got to be conscious of that. NEPA compliance, well delineation for that stream, making sure we're staying back from it. FEMA, Army Corps, TDOT, all the permitting process for it is going to have.
Now, it's possible that stream isn't really a stream, and we might not have to worry about it, but we got to be sure.
Yeah, and we have folks,
Greg, we got someone probably do a hydrologic determination on that lunch break.
yeah, great, yeah.
There's a county entity too, I think, Blount County Soil Conservation,
Yes.
has a
Yeah.
jurisdiction on the river.
Okay, and Julie Conkle, I don't know if you guys work with her over there. She's a great partner, and I think she'd be very supportive.
She's actually coming to our other park on
Hey, super.
Monday.
Yeah.
Isn't she an expert with the ponds and too, like on farmlands and things?
Yep.
She's gonna come Monday with our pond on the
Thanks.
after park,
Tell
so.
Julie I said hello. She's here.
Well, Lena Aldo's the one who reached out to
Oh,
her,
thanks.
yeah, so.
Yeah, we have Greg Babbitt in our office, leads up our ecological services, and he lives in America too, so he's swinging over from lunch break today. Lay eyes on
So we've gotten through a lot of great wish list items. We've talked about some of the constraints. I know we're probably winding into our last half hour here, so be careful. I do want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about funding.
Yep.
Are there other due diligence items you want to talk about before you
I
here?
think we've covered a lot of it, but
Or
we're
anybody
happy.
else in the room? I certainly don't want
I've got one more.
Sure.
As I said, I live on the river. When it floods, it's like one of the rivers out west. I mean, it is scary,
to. Yeah.
Yep.
and I mean scary.
I've been here shoveling sand out of buildings.
Yeah, so, you know, when you talk about things by the river, it's not just by the river, it's
It's in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
and under the river.
Yeah.
I've seen it come up 8 feet in half hour. So it's pretty,
Is there any flood warning on the river?
yeah,
Say again?
Are there any flood warning alarms on the river?
oh yeah.
Not that I'm aware of, but we're taking a look at all that right now. We're also looking at potentially developing an app that would push out warnings,
Okay.
so that's something that's on our city commission.
That
And
may,
we could potentially tie that in somehow if we get notification. And there are monitoring stations along the river that you can take that real-time data, and it will help us to understand
And they actually
when we
send
need
me,
to push
they send
out.
me alerts.
Do
I
they?
got it arranged, so
Okay.
they send me an alert when it's 5 feet above flood stage, because I know I gotta get everything out of my basement.
Who's sending you the alert on that? Like, who manages that?
The federal government,
Oh.
it's the
From
USGS.
It might be a good idea to build in something there. I could see that it, you know, because it comes up fast, and sometimes it'll be clear and sunny here, but it's raining up above.
right.
And so you don't really have that signal that you need to be paying attention to all of a sudden the water's coming up. But we might need to build in some sort of a safety, something, an alert system, visual, maybe.
That's kind of where I was going with it. We've actually got a project up at Cumberland Falls where they have a same problem, inundation problem. It'll rain the drainage area, and it comes down through the falls area, but the falls, the way that they're carved out over the years, there's a lot of places for people to get trapped, and several folks have died. So we have a contract with the state, and we've been doing the flood analysis and been a part of the warning system up there. So I think there's some pieces that we might be able to draw some experience from that, and maybe develop something down here that could go in the park. And just as a, a warning light, water stages, or even, we've developed flood monitoring elevation systems for different clients who are around rivers and streams and things like that. So-
Well, if you built in something in that area, it could work for that whole space.
Yeah.
But it's also close enough to the road, it's a good visual for everybody else, that's, on upstream.
Yep.
And then if you see something, flashing, you would know that, hey, something's up, gonna be at the river.
Yeah.
Now, Dark Island has a sign when it gets to
Oh,
the
really?
certain flood stage, and I don't know what causes it to go off,
Yeah.
but it'll go off when it gets to a certain
We can
flood
find
stage.
out.
Yeah, sure.
Might be an existing system.
This
You would probably
this is
take
what
it
the
off.
SGS says.
Yeah.
And they send me an alarm that goes with it when it goes over a certain.
Nice.
Just the level of the water makes a alarm go
City,
off.
there's a monitoring point on the Cumberland River that we can access.
They send me an alarm, I can check that in.
And that's how we monitor flood stages.
They send me
Bring up
an
your
alarm
11,
at
have
a
no
certain point.
siren of anything, so I'm just curious, yeah.
Not that I can.
But it's something to consider.
Yeah.
Put it on the list.
That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
And so, big picture, when we were here tonight, that y'all graciously approved us, there was a gentleman here from Blount County, from the fire department, who talked about grants. There may be a grant out there, it's a public safety grant for that.
Yep.
Just
Yeah,
connecting the dots.
grants that might intersect.
Yeah, some kind of public safety grant.
Yeah, I was looking last night, I was gonna ask you if you were familiar, so are we going into the funding and grant section now?
That's fine.
Good
Good
segue.
Yeah, I'm done.
I'm sorry. That's you guys sit down.
So as far as, government grants, tech grants, I am familiar with the LWCF, that's the Land Water Conservation
Yep.
Fund. Let's see, the LPRF
LPRF.
grant, which is that a 50-50 match? One of them's like a.
One's a
80-20.
50/50 and one's 80/20. I think
One-
LPRF is 80/20, I think.
I think, yeah, I
Is
think
that
that's
okay?
correct. So I think we'd be eligible for both of those.
Okay.
Maybe ideally the 80-20.
What was the first one you mentioned, Kelsey?
The LWCF,
Yeah.
the Land Water Conservation
Yeah.
Fund. So those are both state grants. Community Development Block
Yep,
grants.
CDBG,
EPA Urban Waters Program.
yes.
And then grants from just environmental protection agencies. It also mentioned maybe a transportation grant.
Mhm.
Let's see, and then Safe Routes to Parks Program.
Yep.
So I was gonna see if you were familiar with any of
I'm
those.
familiar with all of those
Okay.
except the, no, not under transportation, the safe routes. I've done
Safe
safe
routes
routes
to
to schools, so I'm gonna
Okay.
assume it's probably along the same lines. That runs connectivity from neighborhoods to schools.
Okay,
So I'm gonna assume it's probably pretty much along the same line, with providing access from neighborhoods to parks. It's not a very complicated grant process for those. There's also some other ones that are privately funded. I know there's 2 or 3, I'll have to get the names of companies out there with shade structures that offer grants. One was actually a suntan lotion company. I want to say it was like Wine Trop or something like that. Kaboom Corporation, I don't know if you're familiar with them.
no.
Google them, it's pretty neat.
Kaboom,
Kaboom, Kaboom, just how it sounds.
like the cleaner?
I like that you started
Okay.
with
Okay.
K.A. boom. K.A. boom, that's exactly how trust me. It's kind of surprising. But there are different, there are other funding opportunities out there as well. Like I said, public safety grants, for like that alarm system.
Would that be a good, in due diligence phase, identify these?
Yes.
And really,
Yes.
identify what grants there are out there, and really when to do, work backwards from there.
Yeah, so we want to identify what you guys are eligible for, what you think the city could participate in, because obviously some of them do have a match. Is it something that you could work into the budget for the next budget cycle? Are there public safety grants where it's just you're writing a grant and they give you the check? I'm thinking like for the flood alarm. There's a lot of different options. The schedule is key. The funding mechanisms, the requirements, where does the city fall, maybe population-wise? Do you have a Parks and Rec master plan, which you're working on? There's a lot of little things that we need to just confirm. Yeah, Inc.
This is actually, this is from East Tennessee Development, which they're actually helping us with our community plan. So we've got C.E.C Group and then East Tennessee Development.
Okay.
Our city planner, Kim, had shared this, so you all can have that copy.
Oh, thank you.
They can have that copy right now. Okay, so it's got.
Who are you working with at ETD? Who are you working with at East Tennessee Development?
Kim
Again?
and Chris,
I can't pronounce his last name, Chris.
Kim and Chris.
That works. That works.
So there's some good data in there as
Okay,
far
great.
as like population, ages, housing, income, things like that.
Yeah, this is the kind of information that's going to go in the grant.
Okay.
And so we can do the grants, we can help you with the grants, it's cheaper. Obviously, you guys participate a lot more. And we can help guide you through that.
That's kind of where I get lost because I've done a couple of the private ones,
Yeah.
like with AARP.
Yep.
I applied for one, for that part, we did not go through for it. I think we asked for about $45,000 at that time, but then again, I think probably wasn't supposed to get it because we needed to plan more. So, that was my first grant that we applied for,
Okay.
and we're not split. But that's still maybe an avenue that we can go with, is to still apply for an AARP grant.
Yeah, so.
Because there's no match there.
With an AARP grant, there might be a way to include some stream bank stabilization, some drainage improvements around the park, so it's got a little more meat to it. Not only helping the park itself, but the infrastructure maybe around the park. If there's some flooding issues over downstream that we can help take care of. I noticed the bank to the downstream side is a little washed out, and it looks like there's a big tree that's washed out into the side of the creek, I guess, just below where it broke off. So, there may be an opportunity to get some funding now.
Especially, well, with the AARP grant, I think essentially they want to fund things that are going to help people in that certain age bracket,
Sure.
like 55 and up. And you'll see in the data that Townsend, majority of the people in Townsend are 55 and up.
And I think that, even taking the data or the grant application that you've already done, I know we've helped folks with grants before, and that's really a good framework to do the next grant. And the next grant, and the next one. You may be updating some numbers periodically as census data comes in or things like that. But you've already done a lot of the hard work, so we can capitalize on it.
This is one of the benefits of updating our community. There'll be a section in the actual plan that talks about this, but then there'll actually be this Parks and Rec master plan that will have more detail, and that's what's required, as Vice Mayor described in a number of these grant applications, so.
The community plan process, so early fall. I know that TDEC, Kirsten had told me that they start opening up the online webinars maybe, like the letters of intent,
Yep.
maybe in October.
Yep,
Is that correct?
I believe
Okay.
so.
So
that-
I'm hoping we're ready by then to do a LOI.
I think so. I think, I think it's doable. I think that, I think that having your Parks and Rec master plan in place will assist us and help check that box for them. So it's kind of a dual path, this and that plan. And you may even talk to her about it being in a draft form, if it's like going through the final review process and, it'll be adopted maybe by Q1 of next year or Q4 of this year. Just from a timing standpoint, to know that you are in process, you can include the document in the grant application, but, if timing doesn't quite work out for you guys, can we still use it for including in that grant application necessarily? We're on the cusp of having this, and we would like to capitalize on all the work we've done today.
We discussed that a little
Okay.
down there, and she said that, yeah, definitely some leniency, because she knows that we're in that process, we're on the home stretch of it. But she was very adamant about mentioning Access 2030. She
Yes.
said it a lot,
Yep.
so.
Yep,
So.
Yes, it's something that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Throughout.
You go ahead. I was like,
Oh, you're looking at your phone, I thought maybe you had something else.
well, I was just gonna talk about, there's several nonprofits around. Help me. Well, the Civitan Club's one of them.
Civitan, Rotary,
Rotary,
Kiwanis,
Kiwanis.
there's so many. So, when you have groups like that, they're a great resource. It's just how you apply their funding
Yeah.
to be used, or if there are requirements of their funding that you just need to explore and make sure that, that you can apply their funding in maybe the way that they'd like you to apply it, and also that it benefits the city, in the city's vision of how things evolve. If there's a group out there that wants to sponsor the signage, I know when, back in my Parks Director days, and I can't remember who it was, I'll have to look, we had a group that sponsored some interpretive signage in the park. And in Charlie Daniels Park, there's a long path in there that people love to walk. And they walk it while their kids are playing football or at the playground. But there's interpretive signage about the environment, about nature, just different things along the path, and you can go from one to the other. It was really neat. I mean, the signs were well-made, UV protected. We had a nice post that a local artisan put together for us, so we could mount them, and it just wasn't a U-channel post. So it was a little nicer, but I know you talked a little bit about that earlier. So there's some different things.
Can we use some of that as part of the match?
Possibly. So you just need to explore it with something agency.
Cash.
Maybe a match of some kind, any kind of match.
Right.
The folks at TDEC are pretty open, but they only have so much room to accept different things.
What about Blue Ways? Would that fall under Blue Way funding?
And yes, if we can somehow tie the mission, the Blue Wave mission is somehow being supported by, improvements in this park. And that may not be a high bar. That may be pretty easy, but it's certainly worth looking into.
I think it's worth looking into.
Yeah.
I think the tie between the Blueway and the accessibility is an interesting connection that we don't normally get in a lot of parks. Yeah, it definitely is worth
Have you had much
exploring.
interaction with those folks?
Well, Jameson Sliver from T-Dot, I know he's over trails now. You remember meeting him? A couple of years ago, and he moved up, and then Thomas is now in his spot, which is like 6 years from being in his spot now, so they've all moved up. But Thomas was telling me that part down there, he felt like it was low-hanging fruit for Blueway funding. But we didn't circle back to that. So maybe an opportunity there.
Okay.
Because I know, I read something where the governor had allocated so much money for Blueway funding, greenway funding, things like that.
It's definitely worth obviously looking at.
Okay.
And who was that again? I don't know who it was.
Jameson Sliver, Thomas Lamb.
The Clyber with a K?
Was it Jameson?
Sliger.
Sliger.
S-L-I-G-E-R.
Yeah, Jameson Sliver. He's over trails. Yeah. But so is Thomas.
What was Thomas' last name?
Lamb.
The other two pieces on the funding side we had were city funds and then public-private partnership. Especially given the property challenge. There's T-Dot, City of Talon, and their property is right there. There will already have to be a public-private partnership on the project, right? Like just with graded access and use and all that. May not be a bad idea to have the conversation on funding.
I think from a big picture standpoint, kind of like we were talking earlier, you know, what's the real big picture of this look like? I think they should be included. You know, they're a local business. I think they're investing in the community, it sounds like. I know you guys work with them, I haven't worked with them. But, you know, I find when there are community partners, you know, folks who have been here for a while, you know, obviously the folks that I've always dealt with historically, the ones that have been there the longest, really do feel like they're part of the community. They want to get back. I mean, they see the value of giving back. So it's you know, a conversation that should be had, just to vet it, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think that's something the city will undertake.
Sure.
Okay, okay. We talked around that a little bit. The city's going to take lead with
Yeah.
reaching out to the local properties group.
Yeah, I think that's probably our role.
Yeah, I think that,
Take that.
yeah, I think that's appropriate for y'all, and I think it's, you know, them understanding what your passion is for that park and then the city, and, you know, maybe understanding their views of how all that works and how they will fit in is,
Yeah, I think normally we would in any circumstance as an adjacent landowner. So if we're doing some sort of a city project, it's, you know, we would talk with adjacent landowners. So we would do that anyhow.
Yeah.
But I think there's some other, you know, parts of that conversation that we'll have. So we'll be undertaking that.
okay.
Who would have the initial discussion with T-Dot? Is that C.E.C. or is that?
Well, I would think after we have a plan, we're talking with T-Dot, we have regular communications with T-Dot. We have, you know, one issue that we're working on a license agreement, but we have regular conversation with T-Dot about that. So once we sort of get this formed up a little bit more, I think, you know, we can start to talk with them because they've got sort of an adjacent interest as well. So maybe one that's overlapping if part of that's in the right of way.
Yes.
So C.E.C. will not get into any of the T-Dot land now, initially? That's what I'm trying to get, because
Personally, I would say since you're already talking to them, I feel like that's the direct connection. and we would just be the third party, and I wouldn't want to.
I mean, I can bring some brute force to the table. if that's-
I think that's probably the way.
I think she probably swings her hammer.
Unless they're trying to get something.
Is there a small little drawing that you guys could do
Yeah.
in 10 minutes?
Oh,
that would
sure.
help?
I mean,
I'm a visual person. You guys talk about the property. I don't know the property. Show it to me.
Yeah.
I'm like you.
I mean, what we can do is, we can put together, kind of, when we kind of prepare, I guess that's a great segue, our really a scope for like, what due diligence services we think would be helpful right now. We can include a map of that.
Yeah.
And this
Real
is here,
simple.
we're focusing
Yeah.
on,
Oh, yeah.
this is the section of the project that would be in TDOT's right of way. And that can be something you guys can then take to them and say, it's part of the overall master plan for Parks and Rec, which you already have that map, but this is maybe the first one to shoot.
It's probably right to go ahead and make sure it's on their radar.
Sure.
Right now, with the information that we have, or something that could be developed soon, because it would seem kind of odd if we didn't mention it.
Yeah,
You know, if we're
for
about to
sure.
sign an arrangement with them for that right away, and
Yeah.
didn't mention this.
Yeah, oh, by the way,
Yeah.
state agencies would love that. by the way.
Especially if that one person said, ask them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll ask city manager to make sure we have that in our next conversation.
And we're here to facilitate, so if there are materials you
Yeah.
need, it would be
Yeah,
useful,
for sure.
absolutely, pick up the phone and call us. If you don't have them, we'll get them.
And you'll get mileage out of it too, because we can include a grant application.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you next, is, you know, whether we're applying for a grant or we're, trying to get funding elsewhere. You know, most people wanna see some sort of concept,
Yep.
some sort of visual
Yep.
before they're gonna
Yep.
put their money towards stuff that.
And that's why I really wanted to have this conversation, to understand y'all's priorities and y'all's wish list, so we can distill it down to maybe one or two real quick concepts.
Okay.
And y'all pick one. If you want us to work on it a little bit more, we can do that, or tweak it a little bit, and then you can use it as a visual aid for TDOT, for the next grant, or whatever, you know, as we're pushing along.
And you're having meetings with these folks, like, we're happy to attend if it helps to have.
Yeah.
If there's any question you think an engineering or landscape architecture can answer,
Yeah.
I'm glad to be there.
We can come down here for it. If it's somebody in Nashville, we can go see them in Nashville. I mean, it's just.
Well,
easy for us
that's
to do that.
another aspect as well. So,
Yeah.
you know, we do have our state legislators that, you know, work on appropriations and things like that. And a project of this type that benefits not only our local community, which they're very supportive of, but also our visitors, you know, could be very interesting, I think, to them as well. And because this project has some very unique aspects to it, there's
It
not
does.
so many places around in the state, I would think, that have, you know, something that is addressing these needs.
For sure.
As far as state legislators, Senator Tom Hatcher was he was in the Civitan Club when this park was, maybe not when the park was put in, but he was in the club. I did not know that until recently, and so I think he helped in facilitating the
Okay.
fundraisers to put up the blue tables down there. So,
Yeah, cool. That's
he was
great.
a
I mean,
point of contact.
for sure. And like I said, we're happy to meet with any of those folks.
Well, that's why we need to have this
Yeah.
scoped out a little bit, so
Yeah.
we've got something to, you
Sure.
know, bring to them and have, you know, a vision and maybe a range of what the resource requirement will be.
Well, let's talk through that. We got this last 15 minutes. That's a great segue to the due diligence effort and what we can put together to help move this thing along. Aaron, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, so we were trying to think through what do we need to get accomplished on the front end to give you guys something to then use in the application, conversation with private funding mechanisms, all that kind of stuff. So we started throwing down a list of just services, trying to get you through surveying. I don't know if you guys have ever had that area surveyed specifically or anything like that, but surveying, obviously landscape architecture, that's why these folks are here, which that's where our planning really comes from, including the renderings and the different ideas and all that kind of stuff. That's really, that can do all that. There are some other ones that from the conversation today of potential cultural resources. I think we start with maybe trying to find that report from TDOT. If we can get that, we can cross that bridge. Yeah, that would be really helpful, because if they say that this is the map of where we found these items,
Yeah.
they at least glad to know about the front end, right?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
The university would also have that information, because they would be equally involved.
Okay.
I mean, there's Patrick on the front end, you know, there's the FEMA Army Corps coordination is,
Yeah, we can, I don't think we need direct coordination beyond maybe giving you guys some materials that shows you understand the challenges that are involved and the steps you're going to have to go through, or that you and your partners are going to go through. But I don't know. Those are processes, I think, later on. Yeah.
and that's kind of the same with the stream. What I'd like to do is have Greg run out here one day, look at it, and say, this is something you're gonna deal with in a little bit, or I think you're probably gonna be all right. You know, kind of a casual, instead of going through a whole life report kind of thing. So surveying, landscape architecture, you don't need structural engineers involved at this point. You don't need, detailed design. It's really the concept, master planning, and the funding mechanism
Something to
coordination.
sell.
Right, yes. Something to also provide the community for feedback.
Yeah.
Right, if you want to have something to start with.
It's your sales tool, dude.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, we like to run a very transparent process, and engagement with the community early is really key to making this successful.
I had a note to round back up. Is there a community meeting cadence, or do you want 3 public meetings, or do you have an idea on how you like to handle that?
I was gonna ask you, what typical?
If you put us in front of the community, this thing's gonna go really well.
Oh, good.
Well,
No, I mean, like, more than that, it really depends. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of different, there's a lot of interested parties.
Yeah.
Right, so I think your first one needs to have enough of a concept to have people get a little excited and think about it.
Sure.
right.
And to feel like it's a positive and it's a great thing. So farther on, and then see how much engagement you get. I think we kind
I
of
mean,
approach it from
a
there.
lot of times we'll do 2 to 3. The first one's generally the biggest. Not everybody can make the first one, so you always have a second one. And if there's enough response that you all hear at City Hall that we didn't make the first 2, is there going to be another one? And there's enough of an interest, we can do the third. 2 is probably about the average, I would say.
I would think in terms of sequencing, I don't know if this will work, but once we wrap up the community plan, including the Parks and Rec master plan, it would be nice to have sort of a first big flagship project come out of that, and I could see this one being one of those. And so part of what, we still have, some community engagement to do as we complete that process on our, and so having a little teaser in there about this project is something, and then, after we bring that to fruition, having this larger meeting, I think could make a lot of sense and kind of start to build some momentum, in terms of being able to get input on what this could be and should be, and what the resources would require.
So Aaron, if you broke this process down, I'd really suggest that when you all submit your proposal, that you kind of itemize what you're going to do.
Oh, sure.
Just for clarity. And it could become a grocery list of, we don't want to do this, or yes, we want to do that. And then, of course, it could be broken down over the larger, it can be broken down into the initial phase of work and as you go on. But you know, is there a sequence to this process where you may want to discuss or provide your services based on, say, your initial discovery period? You do some surveys, you do some initial discussions, you do some code searches, you kind of develop all the information that you can get without talking to a lot of people, but there's still a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And then you come here and tell us what that is. Those kind of become some of the invisible boundaries of the project that you got to abide by. From there, you kind of then start your design process. You have maybe more project meetings with the city. This is where this input session comes in. You kind of gather all that up. You gather that, so you've got your technical information. I'm talking to you, you guys know this. I'm sorry.
It's good.
I don't say it, I'm sorry.
No.
For the lay people, not the design.
Yeah, you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so we go through a due diligence of sorts for every project. You know, we try and vet all the opportunities, all the constraints, such as he was talking about. The requirements, even pulling stuff from y'all's ordinance that you may not have thought about, and making the laundry list to present to you of our findings. You know, there will be some flood, obviously, analysis that's going to have to go into this. There may be, at some point, some flood modeling, depending on what we can get away with doing in the river, to show that we're not going to create an impact up or downstream. But that would be the due diligence portion that Aaron was kind of alluding to. And survey is a little bit of that, because that helps us set the foundation of where the actual bounds are beyond the GIS map, which are only so good. It gives us the topographic information to understand how the lot lays, where the drainage goes, where we've got issues, where we don't have issues, where we can capitalize on it. You know, even locating the built features out there, so if we do have to demolition some of them, or if we want to protect some of them, we know how the best way to do that. It's kind of the little snippet, you know, it's kind of like your earnest money before you actually buy it, kind of a thing, before you buy the whole project, as I like to try and explain it to folks.
That's kind of what I was gonna ask you
penny
too,
in.
is, because I get a lot of people asking, like, they know that we're in this process, and they're like, well, how much is that gonna cost? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well,
It just
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, it's a little bit kind of like the elephant in the room. Like, I know what you guys had asked in the short list, and we explained why we couldn't provide that information. I mean, this is the time that we provide that information, but we need to know the scope. So this means been tremendously helpful on helping us develop a scope of, this is where we think we need to go, and then we need to stop. Like I said, structural engineers do not be involved at this point. That is detailed design. I want to be involved because I want to see the projects succeed, and this is awesome. But not from the standpoint of, you do not need me here as a structural engineer. Yeah. At some point, we probably will, but not yet. And I think that's I put it in here, just a transparent approach to fees.
Yep.
There is no reason to have, you know, 2, 3 principles on this project other than we want it to succeed and we want to be involved because it's an awesome project.
Yeah.
We understand you guys need to be great stewards of the city's money. We want to be part of that partnership. You're not paying for it. Like, these meetings would look really expensive and they're not. So we want to be.
They're on us. Like,
Right, yeah.
Our time is on us.
Yeah, this is, we want to be invested. Yeah.
Well,
Is on us.
and I'd like to get to that, because we do have constrained resources. And so when we contemplated the RFI, we wanted to get somebody qualified to help us.
Yep.
But we recognize that a project of this scope could easily be a multi-million-dollar project.
Very easy.
And, you know, the bulk of that, we don't have the resources for right now until we get some funding from one of these sources.
Sure.
You know, we can talk about it. We have a responsibility to our community to you know, do what we can within the resources that we have. But we need to be, get as much as we can get to, try to, get to that stage where we can build some momentum, with, other.
You're not able to write the checks anymore, we got.
Yeah, that's
financial
right.
support.
So I think you all understand
We do.
where we at. I mean,
Yeah.
This is, something we can sort of provide some initial resources to be able to, get that first proposal or first little
Yeah.
sketch. But ultimately, anything significant will have to come from some other source, because it's not in our budget right now.
And what our planned approach is to identify what are the due diligence scope items you really need. Survey's likely one of them, because we need to know what's out there. And the landscape architecture is one of them, because that's the planning part. Anything beyond that is probably not at this time. I mean, you still don't need it yet. You will.
You'll need it eventually, but,
And
it's
so.
not necessary expense.
Right, so the way we'll write it is basically in that vein of, we need to be able to recover our, surveyors and the people doing the work, we'll put their costs in there, and we'll be transparent about that. Our involvement is not us doing the work, I'm not gonna be out there surveying, not if you want it right at least. So I think the approach we're gonna take is that we want you guys to see that we're here, we're present, we're invested. Your project's not going to suffer because of that. We want to be providing value, and you're not going to get a return for charging the city for that. Yeah, with Jason, being the principal landscape architect, now he's providing value to the project that's a tangible way. So we want to be transparent about it, and we want you guys to understand we're going to respect the stewardship you guys are under. Participate in that.
I'll tell you, I think Townsend enjoys a tremendous amount of goodwill out there. Just as I hear from, other folks outside of our community, we enjoy a lot of goodwill. I think that will come to, to anybody involved with this project. So we're grateful for that and understand that. And then I think in terms of the, specifics of the project, I think this particular project has a lot of attributes to it. I mean, it's very unique. And so I think it will also elicit a lot of interest and support. And so I think you've got the goodwill that Townsend brings. You've also got the specifics that this project brings. And I think those are very powerful. And so once we get enough to sort of get over that hump, then I think my sense is this will get a lot of support. But until then, we had to be very
Be
parsimonious,
methodical.
I think, with the city budget.
Of your community.
Yeah.
And then once we can show people like, hey, this is what we're doing, would you like to be a part of this?
Yeah.
That's,
You build that energy
we
behind
will
the
get
project.
that,
And
we will get there.
Okay.
Just
You'll
takes
be-
time and patience, which I don't have. God give you patience, but when you pray for patience, He will show you some patience.
You gave them $3.
Well, we enjoy these projects a lot, and this
Thank
is what we
you.
really like getting to know our clients, and you'll understand when I say we'd like to work arm in arm with our clients. It'll make more sense later on.
We really do want to be partners in this. It's a really cool project. And that's one that is, I'm going home to get my kids and stuff, and we're going up here to camp for the weekend. So, I mean, we live here, we're doing this stuff. I mean, we want to see this succeed just as much as you guys do, because it's our backyard.
Yeah, well, we want to do it right, and we selected y'all because we think you can help us to do it right. So
So we appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll get you a scope for, essentially developing your sales tool for, here's the concept, here's what, for bringing other parties on board. And then, we can play as active a role as you want or need in the grant application process.
Okay.
We'd love to be involved in every step.
Very good. Thank you all for your time today.
Yeah, it's going to take a while for us to get
Awesome input. So what we'll do is we'll try to create the notes I've taken and what Patrick's written, and then we'll
the spelling or the handwriting.
It's decorated.
New wallpaper for
And it's
your car.
legible.
Look at that.
Great stuff. On this one over here, number 4, it might go without saying, but it's probably worth writing down potable water in addition to electricity.
That's a great one. I'll put utilities.
Yeah.
But what we'll do, because, what we'll do is we'll kind of create, just meeting minutes, kind of a recap of all the stuff we talked about. Do you want us to send that to you, Kelsey? Communication from us, do I send everything just right to you or to the group? Everyone's pointing at you. Everyone is just pointing right at you.
That's
so.
fine.
All right.
CC Pat, just for good measure.
We're gonna do that, yeah.
That'll be fun.
And then you can, everybody.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah, we'll do it that way. So it'll, early next week, we'll put something together, we'll send it out, and then we'll work on a set of documents going back.
Perfect.
From there.
Very good. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys.
I'm so proud.
It's good, ready for it.
Can I take these?